You're no longer part of this family. Stay where you are." I heard each word like a blade slicing straight into my heart, sharp and cold. Those words weren't spoken in anger, nor accompanied by shouting or sobbing. My mother uttered them with a chilling calm, as if she were choosing a dish from a menu. And then the call ended. 15 seconds. Done. I stood frozen in the kitchen of my apartment, the phone still pressed to my ear. The screen had gone black, reflecting only my face, stiff, expressionless. Outside the window, the September sky was turning ashen gray, tinged with gold from the sunset. The maple trees in front of the porch were beginning to shed their leaves. I didn't hear the wind, only one thing, the void expanding in my chest. I'm Marissa, 32 years old, a financial analyst living alone in Columbus, Ohio. If you met me on the street, you'd probably see a woman who seems stable in control and capable of taking care of herself. I wear well-fitted, timeless suits, schedule regular dental appointments, and keep my inbox under 100 emails. I'm the kind of person others trust with responsibilities, and my family knew that better than anyone. For the past 10 years, I quietly shouldered every financial burden for my family, paying utility bills when services were cut off, silently sending money each month to cover my mother's credit card debt, and co-signing a loan to buy back the old house so my parents could keep the home they nearly lost to bankruptcy. I never complained. Never asked for a thank you. I did those things because I thought that's what children should do, especially since my younger sister Leah was spoiled from a young age and rarely held accountable for anything. Leah is my sister 3 years younger, smart, charming, and always able to tilt things in her favor. She's not a bad person, just skilled at staying silent when it suits her, deft at dodging when needed, and absolutely avoids dirty work like taking on our parents' debts. I thought if I kept being good, kept helping, kept enduring one day, my family would see me for who I am, that they'd love me not because I could pay, but because I was me. But after that call, I knew that day would never come. What hurt wasn't being cut off. It was how easily I was cut off, as if everything I'd ever done never existed, as if I were just a utility, a resource, an internet connection canceled when it no longer served their needs. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I only felt one thing clear and metallic. I was done with this. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop. The blue screen lit up as usual. No emotions, no drama. I typed a few commands, accessed the mortgage management portal, the loan I co-signed with my parents to keep their old house on the edge of town. I submitted a request to remove my name and filled out a form to waive financial responsibility. In the next 2 hours, I methodically locked the secondary account I'd set up for my parents after my father's first heart attack, canceled automatic payments for their property taxes, electricity, internet, and water, removed my mother from the family health insurance plan I was fully funding, logged out of our shared Amazon account, and deleted my credit card from it. I didn't do this out of revenge. I wasn't thinking much about how they'd feel. I was just cutting ties, unhooked knots, unfastening latches one by one, every bond that had tethered me to the role of provider for the past decade. I slept dreamlessly. For the first time in months, I didn't wake up at 3 a.m., worrying about my mother's medical bills or looming credit card debt. The next morning, 7:00 a.m., my phone rang. My father. I didn't pick up. A voicemail was left. "Marissa, why is the county sending us a foreclosure warning? What did you do? Call back now." I listened. Didn't respond. Brewed a cup of coffee, set my laptop on the kitchen table, and started my workday like any ordinary Wednesday. The sky outside was still overcast, the light through the window dim and murky, but inside me, everything was becoming clearer than ever. They had chosen, and now it was my turn to choose. I thought about my mother, who'd said those words in a flat tone like canceling an expired loyalty card. I'd once hoped for a hug, a word of acknowledgement, a moment when she'd stand up for me instead of staying silent when I was unfairly blamed. But she never did. And my father, who always nodded along with her, never spoke up for me even when she clearly crossed a line. I used to think he was just quiet, but now I knew he was someone who didn't dare think differently. I'm not the 10-year-old child anymore. Not the 25-year-old who canceled a vacation because my parents' car broke down mid-month. I'm Marissa, 32, independent, capable of living my own life, and now I choose to stop living for others. That afternoon, I stepped onto the small balcony behind my apartment. The autumn wind was biting, but light. Leaves fell scattered below, flecks of gold, red, and orange. I gazed far toward the rows of red brick houses across the street, where the last sunlight slipped through someone's kitchen window. Somewhere, a family was having dinner laughter ringing out. I wasn't jealous. I just saw myself standing outside that circle like a quiet observer and realized I no longer yearned to step inside. Maybe tomorrow I'll feel empty. Maybe I'll regret it. Maybe Leah will text me accusing me of taking things too far. But right now, I know this. I'm no longer afraid of losing them. I've already lost them not today, but long ago. Today was just the day I realized it, and that is freedom. That evening I sat on my bed scrolling through old messages on my phone. Nothing new from them, just a few missed calls, no apologies, no explanations. I set the phone down, turned off the light. Everything was silent. So silent I could hear my own heartbeat. I didn't know what would come next, but I had a clear feeling the old game was over, and I was the first to leave the table. I never thought a 15-second call could keep me awake all night, not out of grief, but because I was startlingly awake. No tears, no glass of wine, no screaming. Why, like in some cheap movie? Just me sitting there in my small apartment, hands on the keyboard as commands appeared on the screen, like ropes being cut one by one. I started with the mortgage. The one co-signed with my father agreed upon 6 years ago when they nearly lost the house. Back then, my mother called me while I was on a business trip. She cried, saying the bank had sent a foreclosure notice that my father was panicking. I didn't think much, just turned the car around to the airport earlier than planned and agreed to co-sign a new loan with them. It's just a formality, my father said. You're our savior. I'd believed that was a thank you. Now I understood it was just the opening note of a long song one, where I played the instrument while they sat at the feast enjoying. I logged into the mortgage portal, filled out the information to remove my name. More complex procedures would follow, but the first step, unilaterally ending my joint liability, was confirmed. An email from the bank arrived. We have received your request. A representative will contact you to proceed with legal processing. I stared at the screen. No joy, no regret. Just a little lighter. Next was the backup account, the one I set up 2 years ago after my father was hospitalized for heart complications. Back then, I still believed that with a little more support, my family could stand on their own. That account was known only to me and them, and I deposited a decent sum each month for emergencies, medications, or insurance delays. I opened the bank interface. Everything was as I'd left it. Except for one thing, recent transactions were all Uber Eats, online shopping, and even a concert ticket. I sat still, scrolling through the transaction history. No emergencies, just spending. Quietly, without permission, without notification. I locked the account, transferred the remaining balance to my main account. No note, no warning text. I no longer wanted to explain anything. Then came the electricity, internet, and health insurance. I removed their house from the payment list, removed my mother's information from the group insurance plan. When I was done, I looked at the list of payment commitments. Now all that remained was me. As I hit the final confirm button, the clock struck 2 a.m. Outside, a light rain fell. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and couldn't remember the last time I'd done that without feeling guilty. The next morning at exactly 7, my phone rang. My father. I let it ring. His voice came through in a voicemail. Marissa, why is the county sending foreclosure warnings? What are you doing? You can't act so thoughtlessly. Thoughtless. I started the coffee maker, poured a full cup, and sat down at the table like any other workday. But unlike every other day, I no longer lived in the mindset of they need me. I no longer wondered how will they manage without me, because now I knew they never truly managed. They just leaned. And then at 9:00 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Not a polite knock. A hard, decisive one, urgent. I looked through the peephole. My father. And beside him, Rachel. I was so stunned I didn't open the door right away. Rachel, my ex-girlfriend whom I'd broken up with nearly a year ago, not because of betrayal, but because we'd drifted in different directions. She moved out quietly without bitter words. The last I heard from her was a misdirected New Year's text a few months back, and now she stood here at my door next to the father who'd just rejected me with a verbal slap to the face. I opened the door, said nothing. My father spoke first. Marissa, this is getting blown out of proportion. Your mother was just upset and spoke out of turn. You can't turn the whole family upside down over one phone call. Rachel stood silent, her expression uneasy, avoiding my eyes. She wore the pale brown coat I'd always liked. Same loose wavy hair, but her gaze no longer held familiarity. I looked at her. Why are you here? She hesitated. Just wanted to make sure you're okay. Really?" She didn't answer. My father cut in. "Listen, Rachel's just trying to help. She cares about you." I took a step back. And in that moment I understood. Rachel, the person I'd gone through so many hard times with, was here not for her, but for them. They knew I was soft for her. They thought bringing Rachel was a way to soften me. A final weapon. I pointed toward the hallway, gesturing for them both to leave. No words, no pleading, no shouting. Just a gentle, firm motion. Rachel pursed her lips as if she wanted to say something, but stayed silent. My father frowned as if he couldn't fathom why this plan didn't work. I closed the door, and locked it. All that day I didn't think about them. I worked, answered emails, ate lunch, listened to music while reviewing quarterly reports. But that evening I sat by the window again, watching cars speed by on the street. Everyone was living their lives, and I for the first time was living mine. I wasn't angry at them. I didn't hate Rachel. I just regretted. Regretted that everything I'd thought was love was just a long transaction. My parents didn't need me. They needed my ability to pay. They needed someone to bear the consequences of their poor decisions. And when I refused, they called it unfilial. I'd once hoped that if I was kind, if I sacrificed, if I quietly played the good person, they'd see it. They'd love me more. They'd put me on equal footing with Leah. But that call and that morning showed me the opposite. Their love came with conditions, and I'd violated those conditions. I stopped paying their price. Late that evening, as I was about to shut down my computer, I received an email from the bank confirming the mortgage had been transferred solely to my parents' names. I no longer had any legal obligations. Another step. Another tie undone. I turned off the light, lay in bed, and let everything sink into silence. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. This was never a fleeting argument nor a personal conflict. This was strategy, and I'd just disrupted the entire system they depended on. What I didn't expect was that they'd choose to attack with the oldest, most painful weapon words. 3 days after the morning I refused to open the door, my mother sent her first text. A single sentence. "You need to grow up. You're destroying this family." I read and reread that short line. That was all it took to make my heart feel crushed. No check-in. No concern about whether I was eating, sleeping, or okay. Just a verdict I was the problem. I was the root of the collapse. A second message came an hour later. "You've become too cold. Family isn't something to bargain with." A third. "What will it take for you to be satisfied watching us all suffer?" I didn't respond. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew to them I was only worth listening to, not understanding. My response wouldn't be heard. It would just become part of their version of the story. The eldest daughter turned her back heartless, abandoning us. On the evening of the 4th day, my father called repeatedly. No voicemails, no texts, just missed calls one after another every 20 minutes. As if he was testing whether I'd softened yet. As if this was a game of patience. I silenced my phone, but the next morning I received a security alert from the bank. An unauthorized login attempt to the backup account was denied. I opened the app. As I suspected, my father had tried to log in with old credentials. They didn't know I'd locked the account, that their access had been completely revoked. In that moment, I wasn't angry. I just sat still, hand on the mouse, staring at the alert. In my mind, I pictured my father in the living room of the old house, the pale yellow light of a bulb casting shadows on peeling walls. His face, bent down fingers typing, trying to navigate each character. Maybe he thought a few simple steps could restore access not just to the account, but to me. I clicked Close Account. Transferred the entire balance, over $4,000, to my main account. That money was mine. I'd set it aside to help them. But now I knew helping doesn't mean letting others exploit your kindness like it's an obligation. The moment I confirmed, my hand trembled slightly. Not from regret, but from pain. I'd once been the child who waited for a gentle glance from my parents, and now the man I called Dad was trying to secretly withdraw my money to stabilize things. That afternoon, while I was working, my phone lit up with a caller's name that made my heart skip. Leah. I hesitated. I knew I wasn't angry at her, I couldn't be. But I wasn't sure I was ready to hear anything from Leah right then. Still, I answered. "Marissa," her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I'm just calling to check if you're okay." "Fine," I replied curtly. Not cold, but enough to keep distance. A few seconds of silence. Then Leah continued. "I know something big's going on." Mom and Dad won't say much, but I can feel it. I didn't respond. She went on. I don't want to take sides. I just want to understand. I tightened my grip on the phone. Part of me wanted to believe her. Another part was wary. I'd seen enough times when she stayed silent as I was scolded enough times when she pretended not to know to stay safe. Did Dad ask you to call? I asked, my voice even. A long pause. Yes, she exhaled. He's worried. Said the house is about to be foreclosed. Said you removed your name from the loan. Said you cut off all support. And what do you think? I asked. For the first time, I forced Leah to speak her truth. She hesitated again. Then I think, you're right. But I also think maybe things are going too far. I just want peace. You know, I've never been good at handling stress. I closed my eyes. That answer, though not definitive, was honest. Leah, I said gently, are you asking if I can fix everything again? Do you want me to play the savior one more time to keep the peace? She didn't answer, but her silence was a confession. Very softly, she said, I don't have the courage to go against them. I heard that, and I wasn't angry. Instead, I felt pity. Pity for the way Leah was raised to believe silence was survival, that neutrality was safety, that avoiding conflict meant not being abandoned. I softened my voice. It's okay. I don't blame you, but I'm not going back. Leah was silent. Then quietly, I know. After the call, I stood up, stepped onto the balcony, and watched the sun set behind the rows of red brick houses. The autumn wind was colder than a few days ago. I took a deep breath. Something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness, not resentment, but clarity about my place in this family picture. I'd once been the final anchor keeping everything from falling apart, and they'd grown used to it. They didn't know or didn't want to know the price I paid to keep things stable, but now I'd stepped back, and as I did, everything began to crumble. They didn't know how to cope. And Leah, who'd always stood in the middle, was now for the first time forced to choose a side. I didn't need her to choose me. I just hoped she'd ask herself which side is fair. That night I lay in bed, my phone face down beside me. No more calls, no more accusatory texts. I could hear the clock ticking steadily as if affirming the first moment I felt I owed no one anything. I thought this was the end. But 2 days later something happened that I never expected. A friend sent me a link with a message. Marissa read this. It might be about you. It was a blog post, no author's name, no images, no identifying details. The title was simple, To the Silent Hero in the Family, and every line in it was about me. I never thought silence could have a sound. It's not like the pause between 2 lines of dialogue, or the quiet before a storm. It's thick, persistent, clinging to every thought, like a thin layer of dust on long, neglected furniture. After Leah's last call, my entire family sank into a strange, empty void. No texts from my mother, no calls from my father, no explanations, no accusations. They vanished as if I'd never existed. I thought I'd feel relieved, and I did in a way. I slept deeper. No longer jolted awake at 3 a.m. with vague anxiety about forgotten payments. I didn't have to check my accounts daily or scan for bills that might have been quietly reactivated, but at the same time I felt hollow. I'd lived so long as the one balancing everything that when I had nothing left to carry, I lost direction. Every evening returning to my small apartment, I looked around and felt excess. Not of material things, but of energy. I no longer knew who to use it for because everything I'd done had revolved around one Center family, and now that Center had closed its doors, locked them, and thrown away the key as if I'd never been inside, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Why, I just felt an invisible fatigue clinging to my fingertips to every breath. Until one Friday morning, as I was brewing coffee, my phone buzzed with a text from Claire, a college friend, now a freelance writer in Boston. Marissa read this. It might be about you. Attached was a link. I clicked it without expecting much. Thought it might be some social article or a project Claire was involved in. But no. The title appeared clearly to the silent hero in the family. I stood frozen in the kitchen, the coffee pot boiling over steam rising in clouds. I set it down quickly, sat at the table, and opened the full screen. No author's name, no profile picture, no tagged writer. Just lines of text, steady and emotional as if typed in a rush, but with sincerity. There are people in families who always stand in the background. They're never called the pride. They don't appear in boastful stories at gatherings or get showcased on Facebook. They don't receive grateful hugs or congratulations. But they keep everything from collapsing. I went still. I know someone like that. A sister. From a young age, she learned to be silent, kind, enduring. When our parents faced hardship, she didn't ask questions. She acted. When everyone was scared, she quietly carried the load. When the whole family turned away, she kept playing the rescuer until one day she stopped. I knew all too well. Each word sank into my skin. This was Leah's voice. Though she didn't sign her name, though, no locations, names, or specifics were mentioned, every detail aligned, every hidden corner was mine. I don't know how to apologize to her because for years I stayed silent. I was afraid of losing my place with our parents, so I didn't speak. I stood outside like an observer thinking that was fair. But it wasn't. I froze. I hadn't expected an apology. Never thought Leah could open up. But here on an anonymous blog, not forced, not seeking reconciliation, was the first acknowledgement. Simple. True. Enough to make me cry. I closed the laptop, leaned my head on the table, and let the tears fall. Not in a flood. Not dramatically. Just quietly like layers of dust being washed from my heart after years of buildup. Not because of pain, but because finally, someone truly saw me. For years I'd wondered, does anyone see me? Does anyone understand what I've sacrificed? I didn't need a monument. I just needed someone to look at me and not see a walking wallet. And today I got that. Not from my parents, not from a stranger, but from Leah, the one I'd thought would never face the truth. I read the post 3 more times. Each time it felt different. The first was shock. The second was pain. The third was calm. I didn't send a reply. Didn't call Leah. I knew she didn't need that, and neither did I. Some things are best left where they are at the right time and let be. That post was a small gift in a long battle, not to end it, but to remind me I wasn't invisible. That evening I stepped onto the balcony for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. The wind was colder, the maple leaves now red and orange. I wore a light jacket, held a mug of hot tea, and looked up at the starless sky. I thought about the times I tried to prove that I deserved love, that I should be acknowledged, that if I was good enough, my family would change. But after everything, the only thing I needed was to let go. Not of them, but of the need to prove I mattered. I already mattered. And late as it was, Leah had acknowledged it. No one's approval was needed. No applause required. That alone was enough for me to keep moving forward. And then, just when I thought things were settling, a text arrived from an unknown number, Vera and Vine Shop. You should check it out. I stared at the message, frowning. I'd never heard of it. But something in my heart tugged a faint hunch that a piece of the past was about to return. I never thought I'd find myself searching for my mother's name in the city's business registry. But that brief message from an unknown number, unsigned, led me there. Vera and Vine Shop. You should check it out. I typed the name into Google, expecting to move on from the past. But the results stopped me. Vera and Vine, Fresh Flowers Used Books and Crafts, Eastwood Avenue, Columbus. Registered owner Miriam Faulkner, my mother. I stared at the name for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because it felt too peaceful. It didn't seem like my mother. Not the woman who'd used a harsh voice to disown me, not the one who'd assumed I'd sacrifice endlessly. Vera was my grandmother's name, the gentlest woman I'd ever known, who once slipped a crumpled $10 bill into my pocket just in case you need it. My mother never liked mentioning her. I didn't think she'd choose that name for something personal. I didn't reply. Didn't ask who sent the text. But that weekend I drove to Eastwood, parked in a small lot across from the shop. I didn't go in. I just sat in the car looking through the window. The shop was on a street corner, small and modest. A handwritten sign hung under a white wooden awning. Through the glass I saw warm yellow light, hanging plants, a few books propped up beside a glass jar full of colored pens. My mother stood behind the counter. She was talking to a customer, an older woman holding a bouquet of orange roses. She smiled. That smile caught me off guard, not because it was unfamiliar, but because it wasn't forced, not strained, not defiant. It was a real smile from someone doing something for themselves, not expecting anyone to answer for them, not relying on anyone to take responsibility. I sat in the car for nearly 10 minutes. No tears, No intention of entering the shop. I just needed to see that, and it was enough. 3 days later, I got a text from Leah. Thank you for not pulling me in deeper. That was it. No preamble, no closing. But it came from a real place. I didn't reply. Not because I wasn't touched, but because I knew if this continued, a thank you could easily slide into an apology. And Leah wasn't ready for that, at least not yet. I didn't need her to apologize. I just needed her to see me. 3 days after that text, my bank account notified me of a new transaction. 1-800, sent from an account under L. Faulkner. No message, no reason, no note about repaying a debt. But I knew what it was. The money I'd sent Leah nearly a year ago when she was unemployed after her company went bankrupt. Back then, I'd only said, think about paying it back when you're stable. She never brought it up again. And now she sent it back. In silence. Like her way of saying, I know I owe you more than once. I sat still before the bank screen for a long time. A feeling rose in me hard to name. Not happiness, not triumph, but peace. No one called it forgiveness. No one declared anything. But I knew this was Leah growing up. She didn't apologize, didn't ask for help, didn't defend anyone or side with me. She just did one right thing in her own way. And that was all I'd ever wanted. The next week, I started reorganizing my apartment. Not to move, but because for the first time in months, I wanted my living space to reflect my state of mind. I changed the curtains, moved my desk, bought a new bookshelf, and a few small plants. For the first time in years, I chose something just because I found it beautiful. I also started writing again. Not exactly about family, but for myself. Short notes, scattered journal entries. One line I wrote and crossed out, but still remember I don't need to keep everything from falling apart to be called a daughter. I don't need to save everyone to be loved. The words weren't new, but for the first time I believed they were true. One Sunday afternoon I returned to Vera and Vine. This time I didn't drive. I walked, stood across the street holding a hot coffee. My mother wasn't there. A younger girl was watering plants by the window, probably an employee. The shop was still lit. The flowers were freshly changed. New book titles appeared on the shelf. I didn't need to see my mother. I didn't need to ask if she was okay. The scene before me answered everything. She was living in a way that before she probably didn't think she could. And she did it, without me. I sat on a park bench across the street, sipping the last of my coffee. The early autumn breeze carried the scent of dry leaves and jasmine from the shop. I closed my eyes. I never thought letting go could smell so pleasant. That evening I opened my email, a notification from the county's real estate system. The old house had been transferred. Not to an individual buyer, but to a real estate company specializing in buying distressed properties. They'd sold it quietly without a message. I looked at the deed transfer document, seeing my name completely removed from all ties. No more financial obligations. No more legal connections. I sat in the dark. Not sad, not empty. Just a sense of closure. For the first time, no one in the family texted me, "We need you." No one asked, "Why did you do this?" They were living in the way they chose. And so was I. I didn't need to be right. I didn't need anyone to admit they were wrong. Each of us had chosen a way to move forward. No one apologized, but everyone changed. And that in silence was the maturity I'd hoped for over 10 years. 3 days later, I received an email from the county office. Subject line short and simple: property transfer, final confirmation. Freedom doesn't always arrive with a roar or fireworks. Sometimes it comes in a quiet email on a Tuesday afternoon when you're sipping tea and expecting nothing more than a moment of peace after lunch. The email from the county office had a concise subject: property transfer, final confirmation. I hesitated for a beat before opening. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to be sure I was ready to read the final words closing a long chapter of my life. When the screen displayed the content, I saw the buyer's name clearly, a company specializing in buying old homes, paying cash, fixing them up, and reselling at a higher price. The form was valid, no signature from me required. All ownership and legal responsibilities tied to me had been erased. I looked at the email's closing line. "We confirm that you no longer have any obligations related to the property at the address." I sat still for a moment, my hand resting lightly on the keyboard. A quiet warmth filled my chest like hot water pouring into a bathtub. No burst of relief, no gasping breath, just warm and light. It was done. Everything that once bound me to them financially, legally, in the default role had ended. I'd let go. So had they. That evening I walked toward Eastwood Street, a route I'd avoided for over a month. I had no specific purpose, just my feet led me there, as if part of me needed to look back one last time before stepping into something new. I passed by Vera and Vine. The shop's lights glowed softly, casting a gentle warmth through the old glass panes. My mother was behind the counter, arranging a large vase of flowers, white roses, and baby's breath like a wedding bouquet someone ordered for the weekend. I didn't stop. Didn't go in. Didn't look closer. I just let my eyes glide over like passing a familiar painting, whose details I already knew and didn't need to revisit. I didn't cry. No pain, no lump in my throat like before. Just a slow breath, and then I kept walking. On the way home, I stopped at a small diner where I used to sit for hours after school in high school. The place was the same, maybe with a new owner, new chairs. I chose a table by the window, ordered a black coffee and a buttered biscuit. I sat there watching the dim streetlights reflect on the glass and thought, this used to break me now. It's just a piece of memory. I once believed that for closure, there needed to be an apology. A reunion hugs tears and the words I was wrong. But I realized some relationships never have reconciliation. And that's okay. No one has to play the villain. No one needs to justify. No one is obligated to forgive. Just let go. Gently, firmly. Let go so you're not there every night waiting to be acknowledged. I thought of Leah. No messages from her since that last transfer, but I knew she was living her life. A small part of me hoped she was reading books every night, no longer worried about who'd be angry if she spoke out. Hoped she was starting to say no. To choose right, not just safe. I thought of my mother. The mother of now, the woman in the flower shop, perhaps learning to pay her own electric bill, buying flowers on a tight budget, finding ways to sell her first bouquets without someone backing her up. Maybe she never called me, never said thank you for all you did. But she also stopped calling me the one who destroyed the family. That was progress. And I thought of myself. No longer the one holding things up. No longer the pillar for others to cling to. I'd learned to stand tall without pulling anyone along. I'd stopped living as if love had to be earned through sacrifice. A light rain fell as I left the diner. I pulled my coat close, put up my hood. The rain wasn't cold. Just enough to thin the air, make it cleaner. I walked back to my apartment. For the first time in years, I felt I owed no one anything. Not the savior, not the substitute, not the balancer. Just me. And I lived for myself. Back home, I turned on the kitchen light, brewed a mug of hot ginger tea, and sat at my desk. The laptop screen lit up. My inbox was empty. No messages from my parents, no debt reminders, no strange charges on my credit card statement. I opened a new document, started typing the first line for the book I'd put off because I didn't have time. Really, it wasn't busyness, but the feeling that I had to be elsewhere solving others' problems to deserve doing something for myself. The first line I wrote was, sometimes you need to be pushed out of a story to realize you were never invited in. I typed slowly, one word at a time. No rush. No fear of mistakes. Before bed, I stood by the window looking out at the city's lights. The glowing windows blurred streets passed in silence. A few cars sped by like faint memories. I didn't know if one day my mother would call, or Leah would ask, are you okay? But I wasn't waiting anymore. And that small thing was the greatest thing I'd ever done for myself. This isn't just my story. It's the story of many out there, the children who quietly carry sacrifice, but are never truly seen. Through walking away, I didn't just learn to let go of the old family, but to build a life with boundaries, self-respect, and freedom. This story isn't about revenge, but about growth. About daring to say enough when love becomes a burden, when duty is exploited. And it's also a story of compassion, where no apology is needed, only silence actions and change from each person in their own way. If this story resonates with you or stirs something within, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to hit follow to join me in sharing more stories about family growth and self-respect. Thank you for listening to the end. We're moving forward each in our own direction.